day, so you could just go there. And we connect there also. And there's a website, discoveringyourcosmicself.com, and I answer questions, only the good ones. Okay. And then we have this app that you should know about, Jayo. How many people know about that? So you can get all kinds of instructions there, you know, various kinds of meditation and breathing techniques and yoga, and we're soon going to have counselors there as well, so, you know, psychological counseling, etc. So discoveringyourcosmicself.com, Jayo, and Facebook Live.
Can you spell
Jayo. Okay, so our final session is going to be on how to create your own universe, how to manufacture your own universe. If you think that's impossible, then hopefully after this session you won't. So let's start. I wanted to show you a video. This is a public. Has anyone seen the PBS show on You're the Universe? Okay, so it's going to be on again in June. If you check your local PBS listings, so it'll be on in June, and then in September, and then in December. So obviously they like it. I'm going to show you the first 3 minutes of that show, and then we can start going further. I'm Dr. Deepak Chopra. In the next 60 minutes, I hope we can all together, with a little help and insight from me, help solve the mystery of our existence. I was traveling through the country, and one of the places that was part of my tour was Los Angeles. I was picked up at the airport by my son Gautam and my grandson Krishu as we call him, who was then 5 years old. He's a very smart little mind, a very smart little fellow. So as we got out of the airport, he looks at me and he says, Dada. Dada is the Indian word for grandfather on the father's side. He said, Dada, what is dark energy? Interesting question to come from a 5-year-old. And I said to him, what do you know about dark energy? And he said, it flows through the night sky. Very poetic, very beautiful. I said, what else do you know about it? He said, it's 70% of the universe. I'm thinking to myself, how does he know all this? We get out of the airport and we're driving in the car. We're driving in Santa Monica. I roll down the window and we can smell the ocean, we can see the ocean. He looks at me again, he says, how did they make that? I said, make what? He said, how did they make the ocean? I said, who make the ocean? And he said, they. I said, that's not a precise question. You have to tell me what you mean by they. And so I can see him thinking for a bit, and he reframed the question. He said, how did the ocean get made? So I said, the ocean got made the same way as the earth got made. A giant star exploded, and that was the solar system. We're a planet amongst many. The ocean is part of the elements of this planet. And then I kind of turned to him and I said, do you know how many planets there are in the solar system? And he said, well, if you count Pluto, there are 9. But if you don't count Pluto, because some people don't think Pluto is a planet, then there are 8. I said, and where did the solar system come from? He said, the galaxy. I said, where did the galaxy come from? He said, the universe. And I asked him, I said, and where did the universe come from? And without batting an eyelid, he said, from another dimension. So, you know, I'm Indian. I'm thinking, who's this kid? You know, we believe in reincarnation and all that. So I'm thinking to myself, Galileo, Copernicus, maybe even Einstein. I said, Krishu, how do you know all this? He said, it's on my Pokemon. So at that point, I decided I have to write a book. Okay, so let's look at how human beings have thought about the universe for the last 5,000 years or so. Did I talk to you earlier about the different kinds of humans before we developed language? I think I did. So, you know, we were 8 species, but then one of the species, us, we created a language for thought that communicates stories. We started to tell stories rather than just say, you know, that's danger, there's a mate, there's water, that's fire. We went beyond that, you know, who lit the fire, and what can I use the water for, etc., etc. So that actually resulted in the growth of our brains. Remembering that the brain is a map of our consciousness. Don't ever forget that. The brain is not what the action is. The action is in our being, in our consciousness. But in any case, as soon as we started to create stories, then one of the first things we asked ourselves is, who am I? How did this world come about? What is the nature of the world? Who created the world? What is the meaning of birth? What is the meaning of death? Does God exist? And after all, if God does exist, and this is such a big universe, why should God care about human beings on a little speck of dust in a galaxy in the junkyard of infinity? I mean, you know, think of the huge universe we're in, and you know, if you could look at it from a neutral vantage point, then the earth is not even a speck of dust. We are smaller than the smallest microbe you can imagine on that speck of dust. So we started to ask these questions, and we came up with the first story. So God created the universe, and He, remember it's He, never a she, is the source and origin of life and mind. So this is the ceiling on the Sistine Chapel. Okay, the book of Genesis. And this version exists in every religion. Every religion has this version. And so how far back does religion go in its origins? If we think of, say, the Bible as the source of what we call religion in the West, that goes back a pretty long time. It goes back 10,000 years from where we are now, about that far back. And you know, you have all the stories in the Old Testament, the book of Job, etc. I have a book on this too. It's called God, A Story of Revelations, which tracks the movement of how humans have thought about their origin or the origin of the universe. So some version of this exists in every religion. God exists somewhere there, maybe, out in space. Of course, no one has seen him, but he's usually conceived as a male, because religion came about in patriarchal societies. So if you track again the history of our development, at the very beginning of human origins, after we created language, okay, and nobody knows how language evolved. It's a mystery. But after we created language, then we have had many eras. The first was hunter-gatherers. So the main activity of humankind was to go hunt and bring food. And that was the job of the guys, right? So the leaders were men. The women stayed at home, they took care of their children, and many times the person who went for the hunt actually didn't come back. Okay, so men were in a sense both important and also dispensable. You know, they were dispensable because half of them may not have returned. They were eaten by a tiger or something, and or killed in the wild. But they were important and they were indispensable. You know, many times I wondered why you need 200 million sperm for one egg. People say it's because guys don't like to stop for directions, and they're always in a hurry. But you know, it takes 200 million sperm for one to find its way to the egg. That tells you something about biological evolution. In any case, so because the male was the leader, was powerful, hunter-gatherers were basically people who had a lot of muscle and who could go and hunt and kill other predators and bring back food. So that's probably the origin of religion as a patriarchal idea. God is a male, a dead white male in the sky. So, as I said, this is a version in many, many religions, going back to the hunter-gatherer age. And then what was the next stage of human development in terms of economy? After hunter-gatherers, we embarked on what is called the age of agriculture and then horticulture, which means we started to grow food, and therefore the hunt became less important because now we could grow crops. And in the hunter-gatherer age, the resources for survival were less animals, because before that it was just the wild, you know, the food that you hunt. The resources started to become products from the earth, agriculture, but also animal husbandry, which means we started to domesticate animals. Domesticated cows, domesticated sheep, domesticated chickens, and domesticated, depending on which part of the earth you were, even camels and donkeys and horses. And that led to a whole new age. But still, the idea that God was a male was so dominant and was a person. God was a person. What came after the age of agriculture? So this age lasted a long time, till almost this time. This is the time of Isaac Newton. And you know, Newton was a very amazing person. That's when he lived, 1643 to 1727. He lived in Cambridge. If you're ever in England, you might want to see his house. It's still there. Newton was somebody who was very interested in alchemy. He was interested in magic. He was interested in ghosts. He was interested in angels. And he was also very much of a believer in the literal version of the Bible, because that's what people were brought up with. But then he was also a very amazing mathematician, and I think Isaac Newton started the age of science in many ways, or as they call him, Sir Isaac Newton. So what did he conclude? He said he believed in God, but he said God kind of created the universe, like a watchmaker makes a watch. And then once the watch is made, then it works by itself. Okay, so this is also frequently referred to as a model that's called the watchmaker model. Watches were around then, and it's also called the ceramic universe. So God is a carpenter. God is a builder, and God built the universe. The way we built material objects. And Isaac Newton said, how did God do that? God did that through human reason and logic. And God did that through understanding what Isaac Newton and many other people called the fixed laws of nature. What are laws of nature and how did they come about? Why do we have laws of nature? Well, laws of nature are regularities of experience. So you see the earth, you don't know the earth is spinning on its axis, but you see every day that the sun rises and it sets. So, of course, long time ago, people thought the earth was the center and the sun was moving around the earth, and that was what the observation seemed to suggest, only till Copernicus and Galileo said, no, the earth is going around the sun. You know what happened to Galileo. He was placed under house arrest. I actually saw the letter that he wrote to the Pope, and the Pope's response, you're under arrest. So what are laws of nature? They are regularities of experience. You see that things happen, and then you try and reason out why they happen. Newton was one of the greatest mathematicians of all time. So, he discovered calculus at the same time as Leibniz did. And at this time there were these other people that we know as philosophers. In fact, there was no word then for science. Science was referred to as natural philosophy. So natural philosophy is how do we figure out how nature works. Leibniz also discovered calculus at the same time as Newton, about the same time. And Leibniz was more or less around the same time, a great mathematician, philosopher, natural philosopher. Spinoza, if you know that even Einstein said, I believe in God, it's Spinoza's God. Spinoza means the philosopher Spinoza, who said God is that which governs the laws of nature. Voltaire, and then of course the most famous of them, René Descartes. So even if you haven't read philosophy, you know, you've heard the phrase, I think, therefore I am. Spinoza is known for that. And just, where are we now? We don't believe that. Okay? I think, therefore I am is got it backwards. I am, therefore I think. I am comes before a thought, right? Awareness is prior to thought. But in any case, Descartes created a philosophy that is called dualism. It's referred to as Cartesian dualism after René Descartes. Dualism means there are two realms of existence. A spiritual realm, which is also, our mind is part of the spiritual realm, and then a physical realm. And this was immediately accepted, even by the Pope and by the religious people of the time. In part, it made sense, the spirit world and the mental world are different worlds than this world that we see. So it makes sense that there should be two different worlds. And then, of course, it was partly, maybe some people suggest, a political settlement between the church and the scientists. So the church, in a sense, knew that scientists were getting popular in this era, natural philosophers, and so let them deal with the material world, and we, the priests, will deal with the spiritual world. So you can be both. You can be in this world and not of it. As you know, that's a very popular phrase, to be in the world and not of it. To be in the world is to be in the physical world with a physical body, and then we also understand that there's a spiritual world. This was a settlement, in a sense. The classical universe, as we still call it the classical universe, was ruled by the laws of motion. If you studied even basic physics, then you have heard of these laws of motion. An object moving in space will continue to move if there is no resistance. Newton also described the law of gravity, because the story is he saw an apple fall to the ground. We don't know if that story is true or not, but if you go to Cambridge, there's a tree that they say, this was the tree he was sitting under, and it's an apple tree, so that may be true. But before Newton, there was somebody called Kepler who had already described these laws of planetary motion. You know, the Earth is going around the sun, and the moon and the Earth have a relationship. It's probably due to, now we know, gravity. These laws explain the motion of objects on Earth and of celestial bodies. And around this time, a new law was described by Newton and Kepler and all these guys, the law of thermodynamics. What is the law of thermodynamics? It refers to as entropy, that everything ultimately decays. Matter is subject to decay or entropy. Given enough time, everything will decay into what we can now call the heat death of absolute zero. So, okay, let's go back to this universe and Cartesian dualistic thinking, which means mind and spirit are one world and the physical world is different. So this is no longer acceptable to any respectable scientist. The dualistic worldview is not acceptable. And for many reasons that I will not go into right now, which are basically have to do with mind-body interactions. So first of all, the dualistic worldview violates the laws of physics. One of them, the most important, being the law of conservation of energy and matter. So if the mind and the body and the world are different, then how does the mind interact with the body? And we know it does. I'm using my mind now to vibrate my vocal cords so I can give you this talk. And the vibration of my vocal cords and the energy coming from my brain to create this vibration is physical. But my thoughts are not physical. So even if I raise my hand, how does that happen? Because I start with an intention, I start with a thought which is not physical. Nobody's ever seen a thought, but this is very physical. So René Descartes' dualistic thinking doesn't hold water with either philosophers or scientists. Violates physical laws, and we do not know how the mental and spiritual world connect with the physical world. So then what happened is, scientists and philosophers said, dualism is wrong, so they introduced a new idea which is called monism. Monism means that the world is one entity. The universe is one entity. And of course, then as soon as you introduce a new idea, then the people fight about it. So then there were monists who called themselves materialists, physicalists. The one thing that the universe is made of is matter. So how about mind? Oh, somehow matter produces mind. Those molecules in your brain, they produce thought. Okay. The dance of molecules produces thought, feelings, emotions. So this led to what we call materialism or physicalism as a philosophy. Everything is physical. You know, when you think something is not important, what do you say? Doesn't matter. Okay, because we only think in material terms. Okay. So this idea of a classical universe, which is all matter, became the basis of what we call the industrial age. You know, so suddenly from being hunter-gatherers to what do you call it, agricultural age, although the agricultural age is still with us, we started thinking of matter as the source of wealth and economy and industry. So we made factories, and what happened is there was a shift in people's thinking to what is valuable: gold, silver, and minerals. Why? Because with these we could make not only beautiful ornaments, we could make factories, we could make machines. We later went on to make automobiles, airplanes, intergalactic probes, satellites. All this came fundamentally from Newton's laws of physics. So today, if people can land on the moon or you can send a rover to Mars, it goes back to this person's thought process. Isaac Newton, an amazing human being. And he gave rise to the industrial age. Till this person showed up, Albert Einstein, 1879, 1955. As you know, he was German. He worked in the post office for a while. He was a scientist of unbelievable mind, mathematician, a great visionary, and he described the relativistic universe. So what is the relativistic universe? There are, and basically, by the way, these laws are all mathematics. We'll come back to that, mathematics, later. But the laws of nature are mathematical laws that describe, through mathematical equations, the most famous of all time is E is equal to mc squared. E is energy, mc squared, mass multiplied by the square of the speed of light is energy. So matter and energy are the same when we know that a lot of energy is packed inside a small amount of matter. And as you know, it was Einstein's insights and insights of other people that ultimately led to the creation of the atomic bomb, which is basically disruption of the energy that comes from the explosion that results when you disrupt an atom. Okay. There were many people involved in that, as you know. It's called the Manhattan Project. Many regretted that. Many thought, well, they did it because Germany was going to make the atomic bomb. There's lots of stories about this. Don't need to get into the politics. But it led to a new age. The theory of relativity, the first theory of relativity is called the special theory of relativity. Mass and energy are the same thing. Energy can be converted, matter can be converted to energy. The speed of light is a constant for all frames of reference. So no matter where you are in the universe, no matter how fast you're traveling, the speed of light remains at 300,000 kilometers per second. or 180,000 miles per second. And from this, many things were derived, which now are true. Okay, so Einstein predicted that if you take somebody in a spaceship, send them off at a very fast speed, close to the speed of light, they come back in 8 years, they've only aged 8 years, while people on Earth, a whole generation have passed. So the first time, he introduced the idea that time is relative. Time is relative to the location, the position, and the speed with which that observer is traveling. And so time passes differently depending on where you are and how you're moving. I'm trying to simplify this, maybe too simplify, but that's the basis of the special theory of relativity. In 1915, he published the general theory of relativity. Actually, recently in Israel, I saw his paper, and his first paper where he was actually writing down this theory in handwriting, crossing out, reworking the equations. And it's very interesting. By just looking at that paper, you can see how his mind was working and how he's struggling till he got into it. So what did he do different from Einstein's, from Newton's laws of gravity? He said that actually gravity was a wrinkle in space-time. So he visualized that space-time is like a foam, and if you, let's say you have a net, and you drop a big ball into it, the ball will just settle down into the center, and you'll get a distortion of the net, right? You're understanding what I'm saying? So the net was, his net was space-time. And when space-time bends, then gravity is created that makes mass move. One way to summarize Einstein's general theory of relativity is mass tells space-time how to curve. Mass tells space-time how to curve, and space-time curves mass. Mass tells space-time how to curve, and space-time tells mass how to move. Okay. Now, if you ask people, how do you visualize? How do I visualize the curvature of space and time? And the answer is, you don't. It's impossible to visualize space-time bending because our experience of space-time is this. We started at 2 o'clock, we'll finish at 4, and this is the space. Okay, so we can't imagine curvatures of space-time, just we can't imagine a force called gravity. It's just an explanation, a mathematical explanation of how the laws of nature work. If you find that, we can come back, my conversation with Menas, which is a cartoon. You remember that? Okay. So we'll come to that. But anyway, when he described this universe, it turns out to be much more dynamic. So when you really understand Einstein's laws, then you realize that space, time, matter are not only interdependent. So everyone knows space, at least from a simplistic point of view. Space is where we are now, right? This is space. Time is how we measure our experience. For us on Earth, it's the spinning of the Earth on its axis, which creates the cycle of day and night, and the Earth going around the sun, which creates the cycle of the seasons. But what Einstein said, they're all interdependent. In fact, if you take out all the matter in the universe, even space and time will disappear. This is what he said. Many people had difficulty understanding him at that time. So you take out all the objects in this room, then of course there would be only space left, which will be the space this space here and the space outside would be one. But let's say you took out all the objects in that space also out, all the trees and the buildings, and you kept doing that till all the objects in the universe disappeared, then even space and time would disappear. What would be left? We can't imagine, because all our imagination is based on experience in space-time. But he predicted this. And today, actually, scientists totally understand and believe that space and time are not fundamental. That there's something more fundamental than space-time. If you ask them, what is that today? They'll say, if you ask today's scientists, what is that? What is that thing that is more fundamental to space-time? They'll usually say, it's something called Hilbert Space. And if you ask them, what is Hilbert Space? They'll say it's a mathematical space which is infinitely dimensional. So you say, where is it? Then they'll go to the same thing, shut up and calculate. Okay, because you can't explain it. Okay, what it is, Hilbert Space, is a mathematical construct which houses something that they call the wave function. And what is the wave function? It describes the statistical probabilities of measurement of objects once a wave collapses into a particle. It's all mathematical, but the mathematics works, so you can't argue with it. So this is a video that I wanted to show you, and it's with my friend Menas Kafatos, who's a quantum physicist and a cosmologist, with whom I wrote the book, You Are the Universe. So it's about 2 minutes. Let's see it. I'm here with Menas Kafatos, professor of computational physics at Chapman University. We are talking this time about the relationship between space-time, gravity, mass, and the physical universe. First of all, let's just talk about time. How do you define time in physics?
Time in physics is defined in Einstein's theory of relativity as the fourth dimension. We can visualize space, right? We can say, well, we have one dimension, depth, height, second dimension, and width, if you like, is the third dimension. And all the objects we see are three-dimensional. Time is the fourth dimension. Now, how do we experience time? In everyday life, we experience it by the passage of time, so-called passage of time, which of course basically is
change.
We keep track of change,
yeah,
right?
We keep track.
Of change. Okay. That's what it is.
So there is in the Greek mythology, there is Chronos, which is linear time, and Kairos, which is relational time. Right?
There is Chronos and Kairos, or Kairos, and Kairos is the relative, more subjective process time, so to speak. And
how we experience it.
Which we experience, and Chronos is the linear time that physicists talk about in quantum physics, in relativity, everything.
But now we have this new nomenclature which says space-time.
Space-time.
So space-time is basically saying that distance in space is also distance in time, right?
Yes. And in fact, in black holes, you get some weird effects. The space and time can even become intermixed at some point.
And according to relativity, if an object is moving at the speed of light, which is about 186,000 miles per second, theoretically,
yes,
then time comes to a standstill.
Time stops.
And then according to general relativity, when you get very close to a black hole or the gravitational field becomes dense, then also time slows down, and actually in the black hole itself, it stops, right?
At the center of the black hole. At the boundary of the black hole, which actually is still not at the center of the black hole.
The event horizon.
The so-called event horizon. Time stops, but not for someone who is falling into the black hole. Mm-hmm. The person falling into the black hole, they will still feel the same way as any other day. The people outside, observers outside the black hole, will never see the crossing of the event horizon.
So both relativity theory and general relativity special
relativity and general
relativity,
relativity, yes.
both suggest that actually there is no chronos. The experience of time is subjective, and in the deeper reality, which is beyond space and time, but non-locality, there's no time or space.
In fact, what seems to be the limiting of the chronos or the linear time seems to be a limiting situation where far away from highly curved space-time, like a black hole, or if you're not traveling with speeds close to the speed of light, then time appears to move linearly, and this is how we do physics. But in fact, in reality, really, if you like, everything is a process time.
Yes, but at the heart of it all, at the most fundamental level of it all, past, future, and present are all part of the fabric of space-time as a potential.
They're all part of the space-time continuum, as relativists call it, and it is, if you like, the background on which events take place. And in Einstein's theory, both its special and general relativity, he was talking about events, things happening in space and time, which get recorded by observers.
In their consciousness.
Well, presumably, of course, in their consciousness.
Okay, now let's go a little further. It's the curvature of space-time.
Yes.
Which to me is a non-visual experience.
It's definitely non-visual.
Okay, but it's a mathematical expression.
Right.
It's the curvature of space-time that gives rise to gravity.
Correct.
And gravity, of course, gives rise to mass.
Gravity gives rise to mass. Mass affects gravity. They are into a direct complementarity, one-to-one relationship.
So mass and gravity are, in a sense, inseparable.
And mass and gravity are inseparable.
And they, in turn, are the result of the curvature of space-time.
Correct. And actually, we should probably use Einstein's own words. He said that basically mass tells space how to be curved, and curved space-time tells mass how to move.
Okay.
So they're directly related.
Directly. And they're all coming from this unmanifest field, which is spaceless, dimensionless, timeless, and giving rise to the whole universe.
They presumably come from this unmanifest field, which at some point appears or manifests as what we call the space-time continuum.
And becomes the perceptual experience of objects in three-dimensional space.
Moving in space-time, doing some things, and those recordings on when something happens, we call it an event. So basically, this theory of relativity is a situation where you have many events, they're observed by observers, and they record, and that's
in physics, what you're saying is that the physical universe comes from an invisible domain, which is pretty abstract. It's space-time, curvature of space-time, and then a field of infinite possibilities, right
Correct.
At the heart of it, right?
Correct.
Infinite possibilities, omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, because non-locality precisely means that.
Correct. Although in the theory of relativity, non-locality doesn't really enter the picture per se, but of course in quantum theory it does enter.
Okay, so essentially we are giving a physics, cosmological, relativistic framework for how the abstract invisible becomes the concrete visible.
Correct.
And you're saying to me, at least you're suggesting, that the universe is more mind-like than machine-like.
The universe, because it doesn't really have a substance per se. The substance, according to Einstein, is nothing more than a curvature of space-time. So it's very abstract, right? It's not material. And in fact, that is one of the big problems with physics today, is that the theory of relativity and quantum theory have not been unified yet.
To me, what you've described is how the womb of creation, the cosmic mind, or God actually becomes the physical universe. Would I be exaggerating that?
It would be, again, perhaps a poetic way to put it, but actually quite accurate in many ways.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so that's how we slowly came to write the book. But I think if you don't understand
equations, it's fair to say that everybody would agree that what we call the physical universe is a projection of something that's invisible. Okay, they can call it the curvature of space-time or whatever, but what we experience as the physical universe is the product of something that is invisible. Okay, that cannot be seen, cannot be in any way touched or grasped by our senses. That's where we are. At this point, what happened is there are a lot of other people who showed up in Einstein's life, and these are very famous people, Niels Bohr, Schrödinger. By the way, Schrödinger was a Vedantist. If you want to read more about him, he's written a beautiful book called What is Life? Around the time, and people kind of were upset with him because he went, as they say, he went philosophical. So these were the other people. And what did they describe? They describe what we today know as quantum mechanics. This deals with the behavior of electrons, photons, other elementary particles. Fundamental processes here become ambiguous, means waves and particles are manifestations of the same reality. A wave is invisible, a particle is visible. A wave is a potential, a particle is a thing. Particles have units of mass and energy, waves can't be seen. Where are they? Hilbert Space. Okay, some imaginary space. And at this time, something called uncertain principle was described for the first time that questioned the fixed laws of nature. Okay, so uncertainty principle, as originally described, is you cannot know the position and the momentum of a particle at the same time. So let's say the particle, normally if I talk to you on the phone, I might ask you, so where are you? And you might say, I'm in New York. What are you doing? I'm at a restaurant having dinner with Alice. But you can't ask that question of a particle. You can either ask it, where are you? And say, I'll be in New York, or I'm in such and such galaxy. What are you doing? It says, not telling. Okay. Or you can ask the other question. Where are you? Of the same particle. Bob, Alice, where are you? I'm in Alpha Centauri. What are you doing? I'm not telling you. So, in order to know the position, you sacrifice what it's doing, its movement. In order to know the movement, you sacrifice its position. This is called Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. So this led to some discomfort because everything is supposed to be fixed, and now it seems we cannot actually know everything exactly. Also, according to the Copenhagen interpretation, which is all these people, Niels Bohr principally, who was from Denmark, he said basically until you observe the universe, until you observe a wave, or until you do a measurement, there is no particle. This has huge implications, which means that unless you're looking at the universe, it's not there. Somebody is looking at the universe. Some conscious being is looking at the universe. It doesn't exist. So you can see it was very uncomfortable, this kind of theory. And even today, the Copenhagen interpretation is the most popular. But you see what this theory introduced? It introduced, in a sense, consciousness. You need consciousness to observe. So this theory introduced the idea that consciousness is required to convert the invisible into the visible. When you introduce consciousness, then you introduce all other ideas. You say, what is consciousness? Is there a God? Is there a cosmic mind? So you can see how everybody rebelled against this. This theory remained popular, still is the most popular interpretation of quantum mechanics, but there are many other theories, interpretations of it. But over here, we introduced another idea. Non-locality. So there is some realm, invisible, where everything is instantly connected to everything else, instantly correlated. I explained that yesterday a little bit. And this correlation is instantaneous, it's unmediated, it's unmitigated. This was, again, something that Einstein didn't come to terms with in his time. It's too much, because he was a realist. And in fact, the book, You Are the Universe, begins with a conversation between Einstein and Tagore. It ends with a conversation between Tagore, because Tagore was the other extreme. There's only consciousness. Okay? So now if you go to Wikipedia and you say, check out the interpretations of quantum mechanics. And so what are the interpretations? Interpretations are things that philosophers ask. What does it mean? That's fine. We do the calculations, they work. We make computers, we make transistors, we make superconductors. We've moved from the industrial age to what do we call this age? The information age, right? So information has become the source of wealth. Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, what are they selling? Information technologies. So the wealthiest nations are those that are selling a microchip, and what you do with the microchip. What's a microchip? It's a piece of silicon with a piece of dust with information in it. More valuable than gold, more valuable than silver, more valuable than minerals. Even though you can't eat it, more valuable than agricultural products. And it's changing the way we take it for granted, right? So the calculations work, but people still want to know, what does it mean? Okay. So when you go to Wikipedia, this is what you find. These are 20 plus interpretations, which means everybody has their own version of what it means. At this moment, the two most popular versions, one is called the Copenhagen interpretation, which means you need a conscious observer, and the other is called the chaotic inflation version, which means you don't need consciousness. So again, these are mathematical theories, so if you go to scientists and say, can you please explain this to me, because I don't know the math. So I went to really good mathematician, cosmologist, before I wrote the book. His name is Joel Primack. He described what is called dark matter, and I asked him, can you explain cosmic inflation to me? So he said, yes. Imagine there's a casino, a cosmic Las Vegas, outside of space-time. And in this cosmic Las Vegas, there are millions of slot machines. Not millions, sorry, an infinity of slot machines. And each of these is throwing up coins, and they come back heads up or tails up, 50-50. But then in one scenario, they come back tails up almost an infinite number of times. Every time the coin comes back heads up, it doubles. Every time the coin comes tails up, it halves. And if you have an infinity of tails, then you get to Planck's scale, where the quantum fluctuation escapes the cosmic casino because there's a hole in the casino which is about that size, and then it spins off in the universe. And because this is happening for infinity, there are infinite universes. The math works. So according to this theory, there are infinite universes. By the way, in the Yoga Vashishta, the great yogi Vashishta says, infinite universes come and go in the vast expanse of consciousness like motes of dust dancing in a beam of light. Beautiful image. But of course that includes consciousness, this one doesn't. Well, if you have 20 plus versions of something, you can settle for one thing. No one knows what's going on. Okay, so Copenhagen was most popular. And now these are all these different interpretations. Eternal inflation, superstrings, many worlds, multiverse, M theory, Big Bang, all leading to an uncertain universe. Physics has come to a dead end. Science, literally, as far as the origins of the universe, Doesn't matter what you believe about the Big Bang or what you read about the Big Bang, they all reflect opinions. Science cannot explain the universe, cannot explain what created the Big Bang, cannot explain what happened in what is called the Planck epoch, 10 to the power of minus 43 seconds. The fact that, as my grandson at 5 years said, 70% of the universe is dark energy, a mysterious mathematical notion that says, the universe is expanding because of an anti-gravity force. That is 70% of the universe. Of the remaining 30%, 26% is dark matter, invisible matter that brings gravity. Nobody's seen it. How do you know it's there? Oh, it fits the equations. So the visible universe in the form of stars and planets is 0.01% of what's out there. The rest is invisible. That's 2 trillion galaxies, 700 sextillion stars, trillions of planets, 0.01%. What's the rest? Invisible. Don't know. But these are the equations. So you say, okay, let's look at the visible universe, 0.01%, which is 2 trillion galaxies, 700 sextillion stars, trillions of planets. That's made of atoms. Yeah? Yes. Well, atoms are made of particles. Yes? Yes. Particles are waves. Yes. What are waves made of? They're made of possibilities. Where do these possibilities exist? Don't know. So what we are saying is there's a solution. All these random events are not enough to explain the fine-tuning of the laws of nature, the rise of life on earth, and we can only now say that physics and science, even though they are very successful in creating technology and doing calculations that help us create technology, they don't help us in understanding how the universe comes from mathematical possibilities in a dimensionless reality. What is that dimensionless reality? So I took you through this the first day. The fact is, none of what I've told you explains how we experience reality. It doesn't tell you how we are experiencing this. It doesn't explain the thought. It doesn't explain what is the most important things to us, emotions. It doesn't explain our own thinking, our own imagination. How do we know what we know? In other words, none of what I have described thus far explains consciousness. And that's all we know about ourselves. We exist, we are aware of being existing, we know that we exist. So now, what we propose in this book, which is getting a lot of attention, by the way, the book was on the New York Times, so it's getting attention both by people who subscribe to our theory and people who are against it, but people who are against it don't have an argument for it. People who subscribe to our theory, of course, they agree, so there's no problem. But what we have created, I think, is a new conversation. And the new conversation is that we are creating the universe. Okay, and what we are creating is a human universe. Just like an insect with 100 eyes is creating an insect universe. A bat with a different consciousness is creating a different universe. That we can see a bat, and the bat can probably sense us through the echo of ultrasound. We have no idea what their world is. We have no idea what the world of a dolphin is or a crocodile is, because all these species are species of consciousness. But there's only one consciousness at the ground of it. Whatever you want to call it, God, cosmic consciousness, infinite being, the self of the universe. But after that, the particular species of consciousness, like, imagine a spring and it's all these little rivulets coming out, and each of these has its own universe. But they're all coming from the same consciousness. Or you can think of branches of a tree. They're all coming from the same trunk. So you and I are human consciousness. We share our human world. But at the bottom of the root of our existence is there's one consciousness which also is the consciousness in other sentient beings, whether it's a cat or a dog or anything that we can call a sentient being. And that has its own world, but then we interact with them. We have what is called personal consciousness, collective consciousness, go a little deeper, transpersonal consciousness, till we get all the way back into universal consciousness, cosmic mind, God, Ein Sof, Allah, whatever you want, it's fine, what words don't matter, but there is one mind, one consciousness. And it's the source of this, but also all this. We are that. But we create our own universe. The universe and consciousness are synonymous. So we say we have a better formula now, U is equal to C. Okay, and this is the basis of those words, Aham Brahmasmi, I am the universe. Brahman is consciousness, Brahmand is universe. Also Tattvamasi, you are that, I am that. All this is that, that alone is. There is only consciousness. There is only God. Everything else is an appearance of God, appearance of the divine. If you don't like the word God, appearance of one consciousness. And so what we call everyday reality is our construct. Remember I showed you my shoe and I said, what's that? He said, that's a shoe, that's a human construct. What is it before it's a shoe? It's a color, it's a shape, it's a form, it's a texture, it's a smell. In other words, it's a quality of consciousness around which we build constructs. So the way you experience my shoe is the way you experience a hand. It's a color, it's a shape, it's a smell, it's a texture, it's a sound. That's what it is. And where is it? In consciousness. What is it made out of? Of consciousness. Consciousness modifies itself into a sound, into a taste. If you're not conscious, there's no taste, right? So these things that we call fundamental experiences, introduce a new word for you today, they're called qualia. So qualia means quality of consciousness. So think of the color red. You have an experience? That's a qualia. Think of a taste of strawberries? That's a qualia. The taste is qualia. The word strawberry is a human construct. Am I getting through? So the qualia is the fundamental alphabet of consciousness. A label given to it is a human construct. Rose. Pink. But what's the fundamental experience? Softness, hardness, color, taste, sensation, smell. That's a qualia. Your body is a collection of qualia. Every object is a qualia. Every thought is a qualia. Every emotion is a qualia. By qualia means quality of consciousness, unit of consciousness. Like a quantum is a unit of measurement. So everyday reality is a human construct. Fundamental reality is awareness or consciousness, the excitations of which are the experience of observer and observed in the timeless moment of now. The fundamental experience of both observer and observed is sensations, images, feelings and thoughts. Try and remember that as one acronym, SIFT, S-I-F-T. Don't have to remember anything. All experience is sift. S stands for sensations, which means sense perceptions. I stands for images, F feelings, and thoughts. You can't think of any experience outside of this. Whether it's a galaxy or a shoe or your foot or your body or your feelings for your mother or anything that we call experience is sift. Sensations, images, feelings, thoughts. Don't need math for this. Okay? Systems of thought are human constructs like religion, theology, philosophy, science. Now we have new systems of thought, economics, politics, mythology, stories. We created these systems of thought without even knowing what a thought is. A thought is an excitation of consciousness. And then, of course, we say my system of thought is better than your system of thought. When we realize that all systems of thought, in a sense, are on equal footing, because they are creations of the human mind. And the construct is real for those who are embedded in that system. I'm a Catholic, I'm a Jew, I'm a Vedantist, if you want to call it that. You know, those are all systems of thought. But reality cannot be a system of thought. Reality can only be that which gives rise to the thought itself. Where does thought come from? Okay, so as we go in this, we see that all experiences that we call sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts are excitations of our own being, of our own self. And these excitations are in time, and awareness is not in time. That's what we've been saying over and over again. So totally understand that you are not in time. You're an eternal being having experience in time. Yesterday we kind of glimpsed that, you know. We went back to all these ideas. Who am I? What is the person? Where was I between the womb? The only constant is I. And that is not in time. Birth, death, body, mind, brain, universe, God, the way we use the word God, stars, galaxies, are constructs. And freedom lies in the experience of identity beyond constructs, pure consciousness, pure awareness, prior to the subject-object split, prior to me and the thought, me and the other, me and this, because it's all actually the self. So all human suffering is because of an attachment to a construct, including the construct we call death. Death happens to an experience, not the awareness in which the experience is born and dies in every timeless moment of now. Freedom, therefore, is now in just being, prior to feeling, prior to thought, prior to speech. Who or what is having this experience? So now I want to introduce you to these very foundational principles that Menas and I came up with after a week of silence, by the way. And then we wrote them down. And these are called Qualia Principles. Science is based on the understanding of matter, accepting as a given that the physical universe exists as it presents itself. But we already know that quantum physics undermined the idea that things are solid, tangible, or fixed. Matter is energy. Energy, matter are the same thing, and subatomic particles all disappear into emptiness when we examine them. So the old science of an external physical universe has been mortally wounded by the new science of quantum physics. But we're going now beyond that. And so this opens the door for an entirely new interpretation of nature, which we're calling Qualia Science. Qualia, again, remember, qualities of consciousness. And what are those? Sensations, images, feelings, thoughts. This is much simpler than all the sciences before. Okay? If physicality is radically compromised, what can be taken as the reliable foundation for future science? Only one thing that is constantly rejected by materialists: consciousness. So the information age is now leading to the age of knowledge, which hopefully will lead to the age of wisdom, understanding our own self. Consciousness makes all experience possible. Attempts to exclude it from objective experiments cannot elude this fact. Qualia Science begins with the assertion that consciousness is not a trait that evolved from a material basis until it fully emerged in human beings. Consciousness is fundamental and without cause, timeless. It is the ground state of existence. As conscious beings, humans cannot measure, experience, or conceive of a reality devoid of consciousness. If there is a reality outside of consciousness, we'll never know it. Can only know what we're conscious of. So as we go further into this understanding, that we realize that every form, everything that we experience a form, is a combination of qualia. This is a combination of qualia. This is, everything is a combination of qualia. Okay, so we live in a qualia universe. And the experience of your body is a qualia experience. The experience of your mental activity is a qualia experience. The experience of the world, any other world, is a qualia experience. Other dimensions. If we can conceive them, where do we conceive them? In consciousness, right? And I'm pointing here, I shouldn't. Consciousness is nowhere to be found. It's everywhere. It's omnipresent. The experience of the world, any other worlds, is qualia experience. When I say I, the personal I is a qualia experience. The personal you, for me, you, for you, you are I and I am you, is a qualia experience. But it's coming from the same non-local consciousness. So now everything can be interpreted based on this. And of course, as conscious beings, we process reality differently, again based on our past experiences, karma, memories, which are all qualia. And then we create our own reality. Okay? And all that reality is, we occupy a particular niche in the qualia universe. Just like insects, bacteria, animals, birds, they have all their niches. And perception is the engine that creates a species-specific experience. For us, a human universe. Okay, but they also, all the other animals, have their own qualia vocabularies, not linguistic in our sense, not storytellers, but because they are species of the same consciousness. We do not see because we have eyes. We do not hear because we have ears. The organs of perception don't create perception. They are the lens through which consciousness and its qualia create the human experience for us. So just like you look through a telescope, your consciousness, which is non-local, timeless, eternal, it localizes itself like an instrument into this experience, which is in space and time. What we perceive cannot be the real thing. We perceive what our species has evolved to perceive. What is truly real, the actual, is more primal than the things we perceive or think about or sense. So when we start understanding this, this will take us to a completely new understanding of who we are and how we collectively create the universe. How the one becomes the many. Okay, so this is very detailed. It's all in the book, by the way. So it would take a long time to go through this, but I think you will recognize that there are as many perceptual realities, okay, as there are living entities with their qualia repertoire. Physical bodies, worlds, brains. We can, though, connect with each other, even though we don't know each other's worlds, through empathy, through compassion, and we can transcend even our species to other species. And so, what is birth? The birth is the beginning of a qualia program, like a television program. You know, it has a beginning. Death is the end of a qualia program. And the qualia return to their potential forms, which is the potentials, waveforms within consciousness, where they reshuffle and recycle as new living entities, what we call, in religion you would call that, traditions, reincarnation. So what is reincarnation? It's death and resurrection. It's the qualia, the qualia that are excitations of consciousness, they subside into consciousness, they reshuffle over there, they reprogram themselves, show up as new beings. But it's the same being. Okay, so death, in a way, is quantum creativity. The whole never loses contact with its parts, they are never lost or forgotten. And we do not experience the field itself, but the qualia that emerge from it. We use these to become individuals with a specific perspective. Locality is a qualia experience in the non-local consciousness field. Now we can take this and we can map it through measurement, and that's what mathematics does. But mathematics is a particular form of qualia experience in consciousness, only in humans though. So we can map it, and we can actually now understand that spiritual practices are those that help us understand human experience, qualia, and then beyond qualia. Human consciousness looking at itself is a mirror for the field of consciousness looking at itself. And so Ayurveda, Vedanta, Jyotish, I think Brent spoke to you the other day, herbs, energy medicine, Qigong, Tai Chi, acupuncture, they're based on qualia, understanding of experience. They've been ignored by science because science never had the ability to measure experience. But now we do. I mean, we've done all these studies looking at genes and meditation and how telomerase goes up and how your genes change and what happens with panchakarma. So Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, all these traditional medicines are qualia medicine, and they provide a fund of knowledge about the working action of herbs because herbs are qualia. The ancient traditions demand modern research, and we are doing that, and that's the whole field of epigenetics. And now a new understanding of qualia biology. Our being is non-local, but our biology is local. Biology begins, evolves, declines, ends, but it returns to qualia programs. Okay, so there's a very amazing scientist at UC Irvine. He is writing a book on this understanding at the moment. And everybody tries to explain what is so difficult to explain to people who believe that the physical world is real. If you believe that the physical world is all there is, then it's very difficult to explain this to anyone. But now that you're getting a glimpse of the self and the fact that the invisible is the basis of all that is visible, then I think we can create this science and even understand evolution on our planet, understand genes, brain, neural networks, epigenetics, and so on. Let me go to the last slide here. I think we can take this to the next step, so we can actually create a world of wholeness, healing and enlightenment, but we have to discard so many centuries of thinking. So many centuries of thinking. So let me give you now the latest model on this that Dr. Don Hoffman has come up with. As I said, he knows nothing about Vedanta, he knows nothing about Ayurveda, he knows nothing about what we do. He's a pure materialist scientist, but he was struggling to explain consciousness, and finally he gave up. And when he gave up, he started to have a new mathematics experience, and he came up with new models that he's now explaining through physics, through biology, through mathematics. So I'm going to try and give you a brief explanation, and then I'm going to go into the 7 states of consciousness, and then you'll take a break. Okay? So here is how the Dr. Don Hoffman describes what we are describing. Okay? So he calls this the computer interface model. It's a model. Models are good to understand as metaphors. So let's say you have a desktop computer and you have icons on the desktop computer. Amazon, Chopra Center, Facebook, Twitter, etc., Jio, okay? And you don't know anything about computers. All you do is you press the icon. And what happens? A world opens up, okay? A new world opens up. And that's all you need. You need to press the icon and you need to see the world that you're interested in. So what he says, which I'm totally on board with, is your physical body is the icon on the cosmic desktop computer. You are not the body, you're the icon on the desktop. And when we trigger this into experience, how do we trigger it? Through a thought, through a sensation, through an image, through a feeling. Then that icon goes into the belly of the cosmic computer and gives us the experience of the human universe. And we say, this is real and this is real. Well, it's all virtual. It's all virtual. We are in a virtual reality playground in the cosmic mind, in God's mind, in the cosmic computer. And our soul is part of that. Our soul is not the icon. Okay, our soul is the species-specific, individual-specific part of the belly of the cosmic computer. And it's giving us this experience. And it's, by the way, it's giving us this experience like this. Because it's so fast, it looks continuous. And what is our mission in life is to find out who we are. Who am I? I'm the awareness in which the whole universe exists. What do I want to know? What do I want? Second question, I want to find myself. What's my purpose? To find reality. What am I grateful for? I exist. You didn't ask to exist, you exist. And not only do you exist in timeless being. You exist eternally and forever. What's not to be grateful for? Existence itself is to be grateful for. So this is a short summary. It's in the book. It's on, you can join discoveringyourcosmicself.com, get to engage. You know, we have a new world now with technology. We can connect, not just by being here, but by being in the space of